Scott nervously adjusted his backpack as he stood at the entrance of San Clemente High School. The salty breeze from the nearby Pacific Ocean ruffled his hair, a constant reminder of how far he'd come from his small Midwestern town. At 16, Scott was lanky and awkward, his growth spurt leaving him feeling like a stranger in his own body. His mother, Lucy, had moved them to Southern California for a fresh start after his father's passing, hoping the change of scenery would lift their spirits.
"You've got this, honey.
Lucy said, squeezing his shoulder reassuringly.
Just be yourself."
Scott nodded, swallowing hard. Being himself had never been easy, especially not when he was the new kid. As he watched his mother's car disappear around the corner, he took a deep breath and stepped into the crowded hallway. The first few days were a blur of new faces, confusing schedules, and the constant feeling of being out of place. Scott kept to himself, eating lunch alone and avoiding eye contact in the hallways. It wasn't until the end of his first week that he caught the attention of a group that would change everything. They called themselves the Cobras, a gang of seniors who strutted through the school like they owned it. Led by a muscular blonde named Jake, they wore matching black jackets emblazoned with a coiled snake. Scott first noticed them in the cafeteria, their laughter cutting through the din as they roughhoused and intimidated other students. It was only a matter of time before they set their sights on Scott. As he fumbled with his locker combination after school, he felt a presence behind him. Turning, he found himself face to face with Jake and his crew.
"Well, well,"
Jake sneered, looking Scott up and down.
"What do we have here? Fresh meat?"
Scott's heart raced as he tried to think of a response, but before he could speak, Jake snatched the book from his hands.
"The Art of War."
Jake read aloud, his tone mocking.
"Trying to learn how to fight, new kid?"
I just like history," Scott stammered, reaching for the book. Jake held it out of reach, tossing it to one of his friends.
"You want it? Come and get it."
What followed was a humiliating game of keep-away that left Scott's belongings scattered across the hallway and his cheeks burning with shame. As the Cobras sauntered away, their laughter echoing off the lockers, Scott fought back tears as he gathered his things. Little did he know, someone had witnessed the entire encounter. Mr. Chan was the school's custodian, a Kiet man in his 60s who kept to himself as he went about his work. Most students barely noticed him, but as Scott knelt to pick up his scattered papers, he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder.
"Here, let me help you with that,"
Mr. Chan said softly, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. Together, they collected Scott's belongings. As Mr. Chan handed him the last of his books, he paused, studying Scott's face.
"Those boys,"
he said, nodding in the direction the Cobras had gone.
"They give you trouble often?"
Scott shrugged, embarrassed. "It's fine. I'm used to it." Mr. Chan's expression grew serious.
"No one should be used to being treated that way. Have you considered learning to defend yourself?"
Scott laughed bitterly. "What, like karate? Those guys train at some fancy dojo. I wouldn't stand a chance." Mr. Chan's eyes twinkled mysteriously.
"Perhaps, or perhaps you just need the right teacher."
Before Scott could respond, Mr. Chan had disappeared down the hallway, pushing his cleaning cart. Puzzled by the strange encounter, Scott headed home, unaware that his life was about to change dramatically. The next day, as Scott was leaving school, he found Mr. Chan waiting for him in the parking lot.
"I have proposition for you,"
Mr. Chan said, his accent more pronounced than before.
"I teach you karate. Real karate, not showy tricks those boys learn."
Scott blinked in surprise. "You know karate?" Mr. Chan chuckled.
"I know many things. But karate, yes. I learned from great master in Okinawa. Now I pass knowledge to you, if you willing to learn."
Hesitant but intrigued, Scott agreed. And so began his secret training sessions with Mr. Chan. They met every day after school in a small, unused storage room. Mr. Chan transformed the space into a makeshift dojo, hanging a faded jai on the wall and laying out worn tatami mats. As weeks passed, Scott found himself immersed in a world he never knew existed. Mr. Chan's teachings went beyond physical techniques. He spoke of balance, respect, and the importance of inner strength. Karate not just about fighting, he would say. It about harmony. Mind, body, spirit working together. Scott's body ached from the rigorous training, but he felt a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. Slowly, he began to change. His posture improved, his movements became more fluid, and a quiet confidence began to grow within him. At home, Lucy noticed the difference in her son.
You seem happier.
She remarked one evening over dinner.
Are you making friends at school?
Scott smiled, thinking of Mr. Chan. Something like that, he replied. As Scott's skills improved, so did his ability to avoid confrontations with the Cobras. He moved with a new grace that allowed him to slip away from their attempts to corner him. This only served to frustrate Jake and his gang further. One afternoon, as Scott was leaving his last class, he found the Cobras waiting for him in the hallway. Jake stepped forward, his eyes narrowed.
You think you're clever, don't you?
He growled.
Always running away. Well, not anymore. We're settling this once and for all.
Jake thrust a flyer into Scott's chest. It was an advertisement for an upcoming karate tournament, sponsored by the Chow Fu Dojo where the Cobras trained.
Enter if you dare.
Jake sneered.
Or are you too scared?
Scott's heart pounded as he looked at the flyer. Everything in him wanted to run, to hide, to avoid the confrontation. But then he thought of Mr. Chan and all he had learned. Taking a deep breath, he looked Jake in the eye. I'll be there, he said, his voice steady. Jake's eyebrows shot up in surprise, then he laughed.
Your funeral, new kid.
As the Cobras swaggered away, Scott clutched the flyer, a mix of determination and fear coursing through him. He had to tell Mr. Chan. When Scott showed Mr. Chan the tournament flyer, the old man's expression grew serious.
This is dangerous path,
he warned.
Chow Fu teach aggressive style. They fight to hurt, not to grow.
But I have to do this, Scott insisted. I can't keep running away. Mr. Chan studied his student for a long moment, then nodded.
Very well. We prepare, but remember, true victory not in defeating opponent, but in mastering oneself.
The next few weeks were intense. Mr. Chan pushed Scott harder than ever before, refining his techniques and honing his mental focus. They worked on breathing exercises, meditation, and even studied strategy from the art of war. As the tournament approached, Scott felt a mix of excitement and dread. He hadn't told his mother about the competition, afraid she would worry. But as he practiced in his room one evening, she walked in unannounced.
Scott?
Lucy gasped, watching her son move through a complex kata.
What is this?
Realizing he could no longer hide the truth, Scott told her everything about the bullying, Mr. Chan's lessons, and the upcoming tournament. To his surprise, Lucy's eyes filled with tears of pride.
Your father would be so proud of you,
she said, hugging him tightly.
Just promise me you'll be careful.
The tournament. The day of the tournament arrived, and the school gymnasium was packed with spectators. Scott's stomach churned as he saw the Cobras warming up, their black GIs emblazoned with the Chow Fu logo. Jake caught his eye and made a slashing motion across his throat. Mr. Chan appeared at Scott's side, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder.
Remember all you have learned,
he said softly.
Not just techniques, but principles. Fight with honor, not anger.
As the matches began, Scott watched nervously from the sidelines. The Chow Fu students were aggressive, their strikes powerful but wild. When it was finally Scott's turn to compete, he stepped onto the mat with shaking legs. His first opponent was a Chow Fu student he didn't recognize. As they bowed to each other, Scott took a deep breath, centering himself as Mr. Chan had taught him. When the match began, he was surprised to find that his body moved almost on its own, dodging and countering with a fluidity he hadn't known he possessed. Match after match, Scott advanced through the tournament. He wasn't always the fastest or the strongest, but his technique was clean, his focus unwavering. In the stands, Lucy watched with a mixture of fear and pride, while Mr. Chan observed silently, a small smile on his face. Finally, it was time for the final match. Scott found himself face to face with Jake, both of them sweaty and breathing hard from their previous fights.
Ready to get crushed, new kid?
Jake taunted as they took their positions. Scott said nothing, focusing on his breath, on the mat beneath his feet, on the energy flowing through his body. As the referee signaled the start of the match, Jake charged forward with a savage yell. What followed was a blur of motion. Jake's attacks were fierce, but Scott moved like water, redirecting and countering. He remembered Mr. Chan's words. Use opponent's strength against them. Be like bamboo, bend, not break. The match was close, with both fighters scoring points. As the final seconds ticked down, Jake launched a desperate attack. Scott saw an opening and, using Jake's momentum against him, executed a perfect throw. Jake hit the mat hard just as the buzzer sounded. The gymnasium erupted in cheers. Scott stood, stunned, as the referee raised his hand in victory. He had done it. He had won. In the aftermath of the tournament, things changed at San Clemente High. The Cobras' reign of terror was over, their air of invincibility shattered. Jake, humbled by his defeat, approached Scott in the hallway a few days later.
Hey,
He said awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck.
I wanted to say good match, and I'm sorry. For everything.
Scott was surprised but nodded. Thanks. Maybe we could train together sometime? I could show you some of what I've learned. Jake's eyes widened. Then he smiled.
Yeah, I'd like that.
As the weeks passed, Scott found himself no longer eating lunch alone. He had gained not just confidence, but friends. Even some of the former Cobras began to gravitate towards him, drawn by his quiet strength and compassion. Mr. Chan watched these developments with satisfaction. One afternoon, as they cleaned up after a training session, he turned to Scott with a proud smile.
You have learned well, he said. Not just karate, but life's most important lesson.
What's that? Scott asked.
That true strength comes from kindness, from lifting others up, not pushing them down.
Scott nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. He bowed deeply to his teacher, filled with gratitude for all he had learned. As he left the school that day, stepping into the warm California sunshine, Scott felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He had faced his fears, overcome adversity, and in doing so, had transformed not just himself, but those around him. The shy boy who had arrived in San Clemente just months ago was gone. In his place stood a young man ready to face whatever challenges life might bring, armed not just with karate skills, but with compassion, confidence, and the wisdom of an unlikely mentor. Scott took a deep breath, savoring the salty air and the warmth of the sun on his face. For the first time in a long time, he was excited for what the future might hold. With a smile, he headed home, ready to embrace whatever came next.